"Don't touch it." I said don't. The scream cracked through the humid June air like thunder, stopping Jasper in his tracks. His hand froze inches above the weathered suitcase, trembling slightly as he looked up to see Evelyn sprinting across the overgrown grass. Her face, normally composed like an ironed apron, was flushed and wide-eyed. Behind her, the dog was already charging forward. No leash, no hesitation, just fury and something deeper, something desperate. The dog's name was Bristle, though there was nothing soft about her. A wiry shepherd mix with a spine like a ridgeback, and a gaze that pinned your soul in place. She'd been Evelyn's late husband's dog Haverhill, even then, found curled under a bridge during a winter flood 12 years ago. Since Eli passed, Bristle hadn't let anyone near the back fence, and no one had dared to try. Not until today. Jasper stumbled backward, landing hard on one knee, hand braced in the weeds. Bristle planted herself between him and the old suitcase with a low guttural growl, her body trembling not with rage, but something closer to grief. She didn't bare her teeth, she didn't pounce. She just stared down the boy as if he'd just come too close to a grave. Evelyn reached them seconds later, breathless. "You don't go near that thing," she said, softer now but shaking. "Ever. Not unless she moves first." The suitcase didn't look like it was worth protecting. It was wedged between two cinder blocks at the edge of Evelyn's collapsing greenhouse, half covered in spiderwebs and dust. The leather was split, the brass clasps green with age, and one of the corners had collapsed inward, revealing the cracked lining beneath. But Bristle, who normally barked at delivery trucks and once snapped at a wind chime, was silent now, watching, guarding. "What is it?" Jasper asked, brushing dirt from his jeans. Evelyn didn't answer. She knelt slowly beside Bristle, placing a weathered hand on the dog's back. Bristle let out a small whimper, but didn't shift. "I told Eli to get rid of it," she whispered, almost to herself. "Years ago, said it didn't belong in this house. He said, some things are too heavy to throw away." Jasper stayed where he was, unsure whether to leave or stay or offer help. He was just the neighbor's kid, really, 14, maybe 15, with a skateboard and a heart too big for his own good. He'd started checking in on Evelyn since her fall in May, bringing groceries or emptying the compost. She'd seemed glad for the company, and she never asked much until this morning, when she'd left the back door open and a single sentence on the fridge: "If she lets you near it, don't open it alone." But Bristle hadn't let anyone near it, not even Evelyn. Not since the night the thunderstorm split the cedar tree in two and scattered Eli's ashes across the yard. That was June 14th last year. Today was June 14th again. "I think she's waiting for something," Evelyn said, eyes never leaving the suitcase or someone. Jasper frowned. What could be in there? She used to sleep beside it. Wouldn't touch her food if it wasn't in sight. Evelyn's fingers absent-mindedly stroked the dog's coat, tracing the ridges of her spine. "After Eli died, I found her crying on top of it. I swear, Jasper, I didn't even know dogs could cry like that. Not unless they knew what." Evelyn didn't respond. Instead, she rose to her feet slowly, joints protesting the motion, and turned toward the house. "If she moves," she said quietly, "you come find me. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning." She left him there, barefoot and puzzled, while Bristle resumed her post. The cicadas buzzed louder than usual. Somewhere far off, a storm was building, though the sky stayed a dull, unconvincing blue. That afternoon, as clouds gathered over the hills, Jasper returned with a lawn chair and a bag of crackers. He didn't try to talk to the dog. He just sat, a few feet away, listening to the wind, waiting. Every few minutes Bristle would glance at him, then back at the suitcase. Her breathing was shallow, but even her body curled protectively around it like a soldier guarding a fallen comrade. The twist came just before dusk. A car pulled into the gravel drive, one Jasper didn't recognize. Silver low-slung license plate faded by salt and sun. A woman stepped out. She looked to be in her early 40s, with rain-wet eyes and a manila envelope clutched tight to her chest. She didn't knock on the door. She didn't speak. She just walked straight toward the back garden as if she'd been there before. Bristle didn't growl. She didn't move either, but her ears twitched and her eyes widened just slightly. The woman who had not introduced herself, who said nothing to Jasper or Evelyn, knelt on the opposite side of the suitcase. She placed the envelope gently on the dirt. Then she reached out her hand, and Bristle, after 12 years of suspicion, let her touch it, let her open it. The clasps creaked like old bones. The leather gave way with a sound like a sigh. And when the woman finally lifted the lid, both hands trembling, eyes wet, there was no gold, no weapons, no confession letters. Just a folded blanket, a child's blanket, faded blue with stitched stars and a name fraying at the edge. "Avery." The woman let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a word. Bristle leaned forward, nose pressed gently into the cloth, and let out a long, low whine. Jasper turned to Evelyn. She was standing behind them now, hand on her chest, mouth slightly open. "I thought it was lost," she said, voice cracking. The woman looked up, her lips parted like she might speak, but whatever came next would change everything. The silence after the suitcase opened was thick enough to press against the skin. No one moved, not Jasper, sitting on the damp lawn with his mouth half open, not Evelyn, who had finally stepped down from the porch, arms wrapped tightly across her chest like she was holding something in, and not the stranger who knelt motionless, hands curled around the edge of the case as if it might vanish if she let go. The dog Bristle shifted first. She nudged her snout deeper into the folds of the child's blanket, breathing it in with a soft, broken whimper. Then she lay her head down on the grass beside it, as if her watch was finally over. The woman looked up slowly, eyes red but dry now, hollowed out by something older than grief. Her name was Avery, she said. The voice was raw, almost unrecognizable. I was 19. I gave her up 3 days after she was born. I didn't know where she went. I wasn't allowed to. Evelyn stepped forward, not blinking. That blanket. It was in Eli's things. I found it once after he died, tucked in the bottom of the armoire, wrapped in an envelope with no name. I asked him once, years ago, who it belonged to. He said, some things are meant to be found slowly. She swallowed, eyes fixed on the woman. You knew him. The woman nodded, eyes flicking to the star stitched into the fabric. He was the social worker assigned to my case, said he'd make sure she went somewhere safe. But I never knew he kept something of hers. You're Avery's mother, Jasper said softly, the realization rippling through him like a cold draft. A breath caught in Evelyn's throat, and the air shifted. No, the woman said. I was, for 3 days. Evelyn's hands dropped to her sides. She turned to Bristle, then back to the suitcase. Something changing in her eyes, something not quite anger, not quite understanding. Eli never said a word. All these years I thought he'd let go of everything when we lost our boy. But that blanket, he guarded it like it was holy. The stranger reached into the envelope she'd placed beside the suitcase and unfolded something slowly. A birth certificate, yellowed at the edges. A photograph, creased, faded, the ink beginning to blur. It showed a baby wrapped in the same blue blanket, eyes shut tight, one fist curled against her cheek. Beneath it was a letter in Eli's handwriting. Evelyn took it without asking. She read only the first line before her knees buckled, and had to sit on the edge of the garden box. Her face crumpled, not into tears, but something quieter. He never forgot. Jasper could barely breathe. He was too young to understand all of it, but old enough to feel the weight of what was rising around them. The suitcase hadn't just held memories, it had been a message waiting for the right day. The right people, the right silence, and the silence had finally come. The woman brushed her fingertips across Bristle's fur. She always barked when I came near. For years I tried to come back, to ask questions, but this dog, her voice caught her thought she hated me. No, Evelyn said quietly. She remembered you. She just didn't know if you were ready. A gust of wind stirred the grass. The first raindrops of the night tapped gently on the leaves overhead. Bristle didn't move. She lay still, peaceful now, as if she'd carried the burden as long as she could. Then, without warning, the dog stood up. She nudged the blanket gently toward the woman, a slow, deliberate gesture, and then she walked away, not far, just to the edge of the garden where the trees began. She stood in the shadows and turned back, watching, waiting. The woman pulled the blanket into her lap, cradling it as if it held something warm and breathing. I never got to say goodbye. Evelyn nodded slowly, her voice a whisper. Maybe that's what today is for. And for the first time since June 14th began, the suitcase empty now didn't feel like a warning, it felt like a door. The moment hung like a held breath. The suitcase lay open, the blanket cradled between the woman's hands as if it was something fragile, sacred. Bristle didn't bark or growl, she simply inched forward, resting her chin on the edge of the suitcase, her body trembling in quiet waves. Her eyes never left the woman's face. I didn't think it would still be here, the woman said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. Her voice cracked on the edges, brittle with years of silence. I thought it all would have been burned or buried, but she never forgot. Evelyn stepped forward cautiously, hands clasped tightly in front of her as if she were holding back the weight of everything she wanted to say. You're Eli's sister, she said at last, aren't you? The woman nodded, her gaze still fixed on the faded blue fabric in her hands. Delia, she whispered. I haven't said his name out loud in years. I didn't even know he was gone until the letter showed up postmarked 3 months too late, sealed with nothing but a line. Tell Avery I tried. Jasper stood frozen at the edge of the garden, his heart thudding in his ears. None of this made sense, not yet, but the weight in the air was unmistakable. This wasn't just about a dog or a suitcase. This was about something left unfinished, something buried. Dahlia carefully reached into the suitcase again, lifting a second item, an old photograph, creased and curled with age. It showed Eli, younger and smiling, with a small child in his lap. A girl with dark curls, her face slightly turned from the camera. Evelyn's breath caught when she saw it. You told me she'd been taken, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You said there was no way to find her, that the state wouldn't let him near. Delia finally looked up, her eyes rimmed red, held no anger, just exhaustion. Because I lied, she said. I thought I was protecting her. I thought Eli was too broken. I didn't think he could be a father, not after everything, and by the time I realized I was wrong, he stopped answering my letters. Bristle let out a low whimper, pushing her snout against the blanket. Evelyn dropped to her knees beside the suitcase, as if the air had simply given out. He kept everything, she murmured. Even when he lost the house, even when the power was cut. I found him in that shed once, sleeping beside this suitcase, like it was a cradle, and I never asked. The garden had gone still around them. No wind, no birds. Only the faint creak of tree branches shifting like they too were listening. I don't know where she is now, Delia said. I don't even know if Avery remembers any of this. But I got the address in the envelope. I'm going to try. I owe her that. Evelyn looked at her, eyes damp, something unspoken flickering behind her grief. You owe him that. The sun dipped below the horizon, washing the yard in amber light. Bristle gave a soft, tired sigh and curled beside the suitcase, her tail brushing the grass like a metronome slowing down. And then, without warning, she stood up. Evelyn gasped. It was the first time in over a year that Bristle had willingly moved from her post. She stepped aside, slowly, deliberately, and sat at Delia's feet. For a long moment, she simply looked at her. Then gently, with more grace than her stiff limbs should allow, Bristle nudged the photograph into Delia's lap. The gesture broke something open. Delia's shoulders began to shake. She pulled the blanket close to her chest and finally let the tears fall. Not loud or dramatic, just soft and endless, like the rain that finally began to gather in the air. The suitcase, now empty, no longer seemed like a mystery box or a lockbox of secrets. It was a shrine, a promise kept, a grief too deep to name, carried quietly by a dog who had waited for someone to come and remember. And now, maybe, someone finally had. Bristle hadn't moved since the suitcase was opened. Not a pore, not a breath out of place. She just lay there beside the opened lid, her muzzle resting gently against the edge, eyes fixed on the blanket like it was something sacred. Jasper didn't speak. Neither did Evelyn. The only sound came from the woman in the denim jacket, her soft, rhythmic sobbing as her fingers clenched the faded blue fabric, the stitched stars trembling in her hands. I didn't think anyone still had this, she whispered finally, her voice hoarse and unfamiliar, like it hadn't been used in years. It was his. He used to drag it everywhere, even in the car, even when it was summer. Evelyn took a step forward, but stopped short of the suitcase. Her hands knotted at her sides. I remember now, she said quietly. You're Anna. The woman looked up, startled. Her lips quivered before forming a broken smile. Yes, I used to live on Fox Hollow Road, just past the ridge. Evelyn nodded slowly. Your boy. He was friends with Eli's nephew, wasn't he? Anna nodded. Avery. He was 5. For a moment, everything paused. Time, breath, sound. Even the wind seemed to hold itself still. Jasper felt something tighten in his chest, as if his body had recognized the weight of the story before his mind could. He went missing that June, Evelyn said, voice trembling. They searched for weeks. Anna swallowed hard and looked down at the blanket again. We never found him, not a trace. Just his little backpack in the woods, and then nothing. And the suitcase? Jasper asked. Before he could stop himself, Anna blinked. I didn't even know it existed, but I remember Bristle. She came by the house once. Before the search started, she and Eli. She always hated strangers, Evelyn murmured, more to herself than anyone else. But she let him climb on her back. I remember now. A little boy, laughing like he'd found a pony. Anna smiled faintly at that, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. After Avery vanished, I lost everything. My marriage, my job. I couldn't stay in the house. I tried to move on, but it's like he never left this place. Jasper's eyes flicked back to the suitcase. Something was still inside. Anna noticed his gaze. May I? Bristle didn't object. She lifted her head just slightly let out a soft huff, as if giving permission. Anna reached in carefully, lifting the blanket aside. Beneath it, wrapped in a plastic sleeve yellowed with time, was a sketch, crayon on construction paper. A child's drawing wobbly stick figures. A house with a crooked chimney, and a dog with big ears. On top, scrawled in looping letters, Me Bristle, and the treehouse. Anna's hand flew to her mouth. That was the old oak by the back trail, Evelyn said softly. Eli built a platform in it when he was 12. It rotted years ago. Jasper stepped back, heart pounding. The pieces didn't make sense, not logically, but something deeper was forming. A quiet, unbearable truth blooming at the edges of the story like ivy overtaking an old wall. He was here, Anna said. He was here. He must have made this after he disappeared. But how did it end up in the suitcase? Jasper asked Dot, and then, for the first time in hours, Evelyn looked straight at him. I think Eli found him, she said, not alive, but I think he kept it quiet. Buried the truth with whatever was left, wrapped in what he could carry. I don't know why. Maybe to protect Anna, maybe to protect himself. But Bristle, she knew, and she stayed. Anna's shoulders shook as she clutched the sketch. All this time, I thought he was alone. He wasn't, Evelyn said. He had Bristle. The dog made no sound, just rested her head again on the suitcase's edge, eyes glistening in the failing light. They stayed that way as the sky deepened, as thunder rolled low in the distance. The kind of silence that doesn't need explanation, just understanding and grief. And something else, something like peace beginning to unfold from the worn corners of an old suitcase no one had dared open. Not until now. The rain came just after nightfall, soft at first, like a whisper over the rooftops, then steadier, soaking into the dry earth as if the sky itself had been holding something in. Jasper stood at the edge of the porch, arms wrapped around his chest, watching the water blur the suitcase in the grass and the dog still lying beside it. Bristle hadn't moved, not even when the first drops fell. She just stayed there, eyes open, nose against the sketch that now rested gently atop the faded blue blanket. Inside the house, Evelyn lit the last candle on the table and poured a cup of tea that neither she nor Anna touched. The two women sat across from each other in silence, their hands resting inches apart. The air between them carried the kind of stillness that doesn't require words, just presence. Just knowing Anna had cried until her breath gave out. Then she had gone quiet, not from shock but from something deeper. The kind of silence that only follows when a question long buried and unbearable finally finds its answer. Avery had been here. He had drawn that picture. He had known comfort in his final days. And someone, Nellie, in his own quiet way, had honored that. I used to dream about him, Anna said finally, voice raw. Not always nightmares. Sometimes he was just playing by himself in the woods, laughing like he wasn't lost, just waiting. Evelyn reached out and took her hand. He wasn't waiting alone. Bristle stirred then, barely. Her paw twitched once in the wet grass, and she let out a slow, almost human breath. The suitcase beside her now lay fully open, the blanket and sketch gently catching raindrops like offerings left at a shrine. No one had the heart to bring them inside. It felt right for them to stay where they were, beneath the open sky. Beneath the weight of everything unsaid and finally understood, Jasper stepped down into the yard, the mud sucking at his shoes. He approached slowly, careful not to make a sound. Bristle's head turned toward him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she didn't tense. Her gaze met his, and something passed between them, not fear, not warning, just tiredness and relief. Hey, girl, he whispered, kneeling beside her. You did good. She didn't respond, didn't need to. She had carried the weight longer than anyone, watched the house year after year, guarded the memory that no one else had known existed. And now, with the truth laid bare and the final pieces returned, her job was done. When Jasper placed a hand on the suitcase, Bristle didn't resist. He brushed the rain from the sketch, careful not to smudge the fading lines. Then, with a gentleness that came from somewhere far older than his age, he closed the suitcase and fastened both clasps. Bristle watched him, her eyes soft, and then she laid her head against his knee and closed her eyes. They buried her 2 days later beneath the cedar tree Eli had planted on their first wedding anniversary. Jasper dug most of the hole himself. He didn't say much, didn't need to. Anna placed the blanket inside first, followed by the sketch, now sealed in a plastic sleeve. Evelyn laid Bristle's old collar across them, the tag still faintly etched with her name. The suitcase they left empty. It stayed in Evelyn's living room for months after, never opened again, but never hidden away. Just resting in the corner, beneath the window, a silent reminder that some stories take time to find their end, and some ends aren't really ends at all. Jasper still came by every week, even after summer turned to autumn and the air grew sharp. He'd bring firewood or check on the roof, sometimes just sit with Evelyn on the porch without saying anything. Sometimes Anna joined them, sometimes she didn't, but always, before leaving, Jasper would glance at the suitcase, and a strange kind of warmth would settle in his chest. Not everything can be fixed, but some things, some memories, some goodbyes, some old wounds can be seen, and in being seen they softened. On the first June 14th, after Bristle was gone, they planted a row of wildflowers along the cedar tree. Jasper brought a framed copy of the sketch, now cleaned and matted behind glass. Anna hung it inside Evelyn's hallway, just across from the kitchen, and for the first time in years, the house felt full. Later that evening, as the light faded and the cicadas sang from the hedgerows, Jasper stood alone in the garden. He looked up at the stars just beginning to blink into view and imagined a little boy beneath the same sky. Maybe laughing, maybe quiet, but no longer alone. He knelt once more by the base of the tree, brushed his fingers through the soft bloom of wild asters, and whispered one last thing to the earth. Thank you for waiting. Then he stood, turned toward the porch, and walked slowly back into the warmth of the house behind him, where memory, love, and loss had finally learned how to live together.